Hello and welcome to the Code 60, the show where motorsport is discussed, and I can't think of anything else to say for this second bit. But never mind, in today's episode we'll be discussing the WEC and IndyCar races that happened recently, and also some stuff from the world of single-seaters. But in the meantime, there is one thing that I do want to get onto before we get into the main bit of the podcast, if you will, and that is, if there are some slightly strange sounding cuts, that might be because of my internet issues, which unfortunately did plague some of the recording for this, and I've done my best to salvage some of the issues where they do occur, but if it does sound a bit weird on occasions, then sorry about that. Unfortunately, it's my internet that was playing up on that particular day, but it seems to have fixed itself since then. But anyway, despite that, we hope you enjoy the podcast. Thank you, Post voiceover me, as always, and, well, here we are with a live version of us, even though the previous version is technically live, but recorded, but I'm live voiceover. But anyway, that's the existential thoughts aside. I'm here with Lombo, please say hi.
Hello.
And we're here with Steph. Oh, the silence. No, Steph
He's
is
there. We just can't hear him.
He's. I'll just turn his mic down to 0. It's better that way. Oh no, I can't say that, can I? No, we're just messing about, Steph. You know, we miss your contribution, but he's busy doing something racing related. He did explain to us, but I've kind of forgotten. But
His contribution is keeping us on time.
Yeah, that was it's like
We kept it sub code 60 last time, which was a mistake. It won't happen again.
No, we cannot let the code 56. No. We can't let that happen again, and that's all entirely Steph's fault. We totally the actual podcast itself totally wasn't well over an hour. No, totally not. No. But we've Steph will be back next time, hopefully. But in the meantime, we've got a fair few things to discuss. This was a sort of semi-busy racing weekend. I mean, F1 testing happened. What we learnt from it, who knows? And because we learn, or it's hard to gauge anything, we're not going to talk about it. So instead, WEC is probably going to be what we start off with, but then there's IndyCar and, well, I guess there's the Fox deal and how it sort of settled in, but I'd more like to discuss the international side, because the international feed has a few things I want to raise, so to speak, and then we've got some more little stories, which will probably take a couple of minutes going over, but they're interesting enough in their own right. But we'll start with the WEC, which started in Qatar for the 1,812 kilometers, or 10 hours. Well, I think it actually turned out to be 10 hours in the end rather than that. Such a random number, but oh well. I will explain that initially, I wasn't able to see the race live through technical issues. I basically had no television connection for about 3 or 4 days. So, in the end, I managed to get it working to the point of where I was able to see the WEC Qatar 8 minutes and 12 seconds, or in essence for me the last part of the race. But I've managed to catch up, so to speak, on that, and there's a few takes from the event. Not a bad race, I don't think. I mean, Qatar it's not the I guess there's always room for runoff, so to speak, and so mistakes aren't massively punished. And again, that kind of resulted in a fairly clean race, which is not a bad thing, so to speak, and I guess not too much massive drama, bar one, which I think I think you have some thoughts probably on what happened with that. So, well, I mean, Ferrari took a 1-2-3 with the privateer car coming second. Seems as though they've, I say they found a lot of speed. They're not the only one to find a lot of speed, but they've kept the good speed that they had. And Porsche and Toyota seemed kind of nowhere. That's from what I can gauge.
No, in my opinion, okay, Toyota had a slower qualifying, but in the race, their race pace was the second best, basically.
Okay, I mean it was, yeah. I mean, I saw. I mean, certainly for me, the Alpines and the B&Os kind of showed some signs towards the end of last season, but certainly the form that they showed towards the end of last season and in the first IMSA race seemed to develop itself in this race as well. And Alpine, I mean, they seem a lot closer, certainly compared to last year. They were kind of towards the back half of, I want to say the midfield, even though a WEC midfield. I don't know, but it was they certainly seem to have shown some speed. I guess I was expecting more from Peugeot in some ways because they showed some decent progress through the prologue. But I think even they themselves apparently were expecting more pace than they ended up having in the race.
Mm-hmm. I did read that as well, that they were expecting more.
Yeah,
it didn't materialize.
Yeah, suspension updates, or I think that they'd somehow, or that they'd introduced, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's hard to tell I guess hard to tell how they were pretty good in the prologue and then at the same track a week later. And I think the weather was pretty much the same, I want to say, although I'm sure if anyone in the comments would correct me on that.
I think I remember the prologue being them having some rain and stuff like that during it.
No, I think that was the first practice. I think it was either the first or third practice there was rain for WEC, because there was also in Bahrain for F1 testing, there was rain there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I say rain, it was a light drizzle. But yeah, I think the prologue was dry, if I recall, but certainly one of the practice sessions was damp or mildly moist or something like that. Again, like I say, I think Peugeot may. I think again they seem to have improved. Most of the manufacturers seem to have improved, or either that, or maybe Aston's current pace, which is, let's be honest, that we have to kind of, I think they themselves have to sort of temper their expectations and sort of realize that they've got a way to go.
They realize that they have a long way ahead of them to get to where they want to be.
I mean, they're still fast enough to blow one of the doors off, but
they blew their own doors off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the sign of a fast race car.
One of the things I want to say is I think the cockpit in the Valkyrie is like quite wide, so when the driver was trying to reach the door to try to close it, they couldn't even do it. Maybe they just have really short arms. I don't know, but they couldn't reach it to try to pull it closed.
Maybe next time they'll have to try and get a longer latch to try and like maybe get like a meter or something of kind of elastic, and then and then maybe that might help. But I mean, it's I think they'll. Well, I was about to say, maybe this is the sort of season to the performance of what they showed in Qatar is maybe what we should expect through most of the WEC season for them over there. I mean, I guess there's always, what will happen to their IMSA car, because I think they released something BOP wise recently that the Aston, since their testing, they're actually going to have a noticeable power drop at a certain speed, like 240 kilometers an hour or something, but they'll get like a tiny bit more power accessibility beyond that.
I mean, it's not really like super out of line with the rest of the class per se, but I mean, I don't expect them to be competitive at Sebring or really anywhere else. Probably the entire year. Unless they get really even if they get really beneficial BOP, I think even then, I think it'll be a struggle. But just against other competitors, I think my takeaways from the race were, I think the hypercars were still too good, in my opinion. At least like the leading ones being the Ferrari and the Toyota, because the best drivers performance chart we have. It goes 50, the 7, the 83, the 83 again, the 51, then the 15 BMW, then 12 Cadillac, and then we go back to 50, 8 Toyota, 50, 51, 8. You know, their drivers and cars were the two best, and then the Cadillac and BMW were pretty close. So it just kind of shows to me that the hypercars were still a little bit, or at least the leading two hypercars anyway, were still kind of the class of the field. To be fair, I'm not really surprised by Ferrari's dominance. Their car was quite light, and that's kind of what you wanted at that track, it seems. So I don't know. I'm not too surprised by that. I think, yeah, and to me, I watched the whole race. It wasn't super exciting to just have a foregone conclusion with Porsche, and not Porsche, Ferrari, sorry.
Yeah.
But there was still racing in it. GT still provided some really good entertainment with the Corvette and the McLaren duking it out towards the end, and that was exciting. So we at least had that. I think my other thoughts are Cadillac needs to learn more patience. I think that was we saw last year anyway with Bamber, and he did basically the same thing again in this race, which is try to go around the outside of a McLaren and spinning himself out on it, which he didn't take any blame for. He said the McLaren ran into him, which, from the angle I saw, it was not conclusive. But I would say if you're going around the outside of a three-wide situation with someone on the inside of the McLaren, I think you only have yourself to blame. I don't think that was a move that he should have made. He should have waited. It seemed like he had more than enough pace to pass the BMW at that stage, and at that point he would have been, I don't know, third. And it seemed, I don't know, that was the move to make to secure, a good finish for the race. And then the restart, it's easy to blame one or the other. The series chose to blame Lynn, but it's one of those really unfortunate situations where I'm not even sure if I really blame either. And even the broadcast, like Davidson seemed to say that Button wasn't really following the rules of the series, which says that you can't really rapidly decelerate and accelerate so on a restart. So I don't know. To me, I can't really blame. Okay, I can't really blame Lynn because he was super racy on that restart, and he really wanted to get by Button, in which I can't really blame him because I don't think Button is the fastest Cadillac driver. So I can't really fault him for A, wanting to be a racing driver and race, even if it's against his teammate, and B, he's probably getting by a slower car. So I can't blame him too much for being super racy. I think if it was any other car, like if it was a competitor behind Button and he did that, I think the competitor would have run into him as well. That's sort of my thoughts. I think it was just sort of a unfortunate confluence of different factors in there, but that was sort of my takeaway. Also, in the broadcast, they had the Yoda Sport team boss talking in the booth just before that.
Oh, yeah, right.
If only it happened when he was actually there. It was like that would have been something.
That would have made for cracking television. Well, maybe not the good kind of television.
No, not the good kind, but dramatic.
Yeah, dramatic. I mean, it would have had the internet clicks, Either way, there's always going to be racing incidents like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's just one of those things. The only thing you can I guess the only thing you could do and I guess the only truly preventative measure is if the car behind goes to a side enough so that if the car ahead does suddenly slow down for whatever reason, then
Hmm.
you're going to be hitting empty space rather than the rear end. So
I mean, they were on the racing line, so I can't really. I don't know. Yeah, it was sort of just before a corner, so
yeah,
uh, apparently Button had some kind of warning on the dash as well that he was trying to get rid of. But I think it was, you know, maybe he was braking extra hard to like warm up the tires with
yeah.
the brakes and stuff. I don't know. Hard to know. I don't actually know.
I guess going back to what Lynn did, I mean, the issue with, whilst I can say, oh, you just go to one side, the issue is that, I guess obviously, yes, you want to be a racing driver and do the right, try and stay behind the car as close as possible. But if you go to the side, you then, whilst I guess you're kind of more guaranteeing that you're not going to hit the competitor ahead of you, at the same time, if you do go on another side, you are technically compromising your line. The car ahead can just if it sees the car alongside or it's suddenly alongside, it can then go, oh well, you know what, I'll just put my foot on the gas now because you kind of realise that that car is now in a compromised position because it obviously can't pass you. So yeah, I guess it's not as easy as simply saying, oh, well, just pull over to the side or just make sure you give a little, pull to the side just enough so that you don't hit it.
Well, yeah, you don't really want to go off the racing line because there's probably tons of marbles there. So
Yeah, exactly. So there's always like, even in the world of racing where something seems so obvious to try and avoid a problem, it then can cause like two or three others, which are unintended consequences.
it's
So
really just leave more of a gap. There was like, you know, a lot of time left in the race. You didn't have to be that racy that early. I think another thing about the race, this is actually a general WC complaint. I kind of wish they had more stewards because a lot of the time in races, I've noticed, the penalties come up and the penalty is from like an hour ago or like or something like that where it takes like forever for people to get penalized for anything and it drives me crazy. I feel like they need more stewards or something because they never seem to do them quickly unless it's like super clear cut, but even still it's like it takes a long time, and which I'm glad that they're thorough, but once something has happened and you're being penalized like an hour later for it, it's like whatever's happened in that meantime could have had a big impact on the race.
yeah, I no, I mean look, it's an endurance race, so therefore, we have time. We've got time to like, make sure everything is very thorough. It's but I must admit though, that is like when I watch the European Le Mans series, for example, I think usually I know the races are a little shorter, 4 hours, but at the very least, I know what generally when there's either an incident or like there's been track limit violations, they're usually pretty quick with that. So I mean, I don't know how quickly they can like try and if they can try and put like the ELMS stewards and that kind of process through for the WEC, or I mean, who knows? Maybe they are actually the WEC stewards, and like maybe the ELMS one is just what they also use for WEC. So I don't know, but yeah, I don't really know what about. I mean, yes, maybe more stewards would help on that, but the only other thing I can, I guess, say from the race is well, I mean, aside from GT, well, aside from the GT3 finish, which was, like you say, I think that was fantastic. I guess the only thing I wrote down was Porsche or the GT3 Porsches seem to be,
Where are they?
yeah, they seem
I
to
didn't see
have,
them throughout the whole race. Throughout the whole race.
yeah, the Iron Dames car to certainly at the well, actually, well, I say the Iron Dames car. I mean, that and the other Porsche, they were towards the rear end of the LMGT3s towards the start, and also, I guess they were with the the Mercedes as well at the time. So yeah, I mean, seems as though the very dominant and well, I mean, their very successful season last year. Sunny in Qatar has been well and truly annihilated in this case. So, I mean, is this just a one-off, or maybe the BOP might be a little more in their favor next time out at Imola? I don't
Maybe,
know.
and there is success ballast as well that'll probably
Oh
come into
yeah,
play as well. Although they did change how it is a little bit. I think if they can certainly turn it around on other tracks. I think this is just an unfortunate start, but I think it'll come back.
as I say, I mean, that is probably. I think we'll expect to see them be back in some form, yeah, at Imola, and so, I mean, certainly at Le Mans. I think let's just put it that way. I think with the WEC thoroughly talked about. We'll talk about. I mean, it's weird that a new IndyCar era is kind of, or as people are saying, an era is kind of dictated or has been sort of dictated by how we have a new host broadcaster for IndyCar. Even though the cars are still the same, there's been some driver changes, but that doesn't necessarily mean an era. But the fact that the fact that IndyCar is now being broadcast by Fox, is indicating that it's a new era. Which, I mean, from the best way I can describe, to a degree, the Fox broadcast, and I will caveat this by saying, whilst I do, for the UK, and I don't admittedly know what it's like for Canada, but let's put it this way, for the international feed that I saw, you obviously get the basic premise of, you hear the Fox commentators and you hear the Fox pit reporters, most of the new graphics, which I think look fantastic. But I think there are a few things which I'll maybe raise a little later on. But I guess maybe before then, we'll sort of talk about the race. Which, I mean, one thing I will kind of say briefly, sort of linking with the TV theme, is that the commentators did a very good job of talking about the race and making the race seem more exciting than I think it actually was. Which I
Oh
think,
yeah.
for me, the race just wasn't all that interesting. And there was not that many overtakes. I think there was about 50 or so. I think it was about 50 from something that I'd read somewhere. I think I might be wrong on that, but 50 overtakes or something along those lines, I think. And also the tire compounds effectively meant that the softer tire was pretty much a no-go, and it was not going to be a particularly good tire to be on, and so most of the time the teams would try and stay on the black sidewall tire. And yeah, it was just one of those races. I can't really highlight anything major or amazing other than Scott Dixon collecting a second place pretty much without a radio the whole race. I mean, how Scott Dixon is that?
I mean, he was on the winning strategy, and I honestly think that he had, well, post race they were sort of clarifying and saying, oh yeah, we had like intermittent contact and stuff like that, so he thought maybe I don't know, the radio was still kind of working a little bit, etc. Because in IndyCar, I think there's a rule that says your radio has to work. So I think they were covering their butts after the race to sort of clarify that it was still kind of working sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like, because I mean, Schwartzman, during more of the practice sessions, I think they couldn't go out for most of the session because they had a radio issue, and they couldn't, and well, he wasn't able to head on track. And then there was also, well, I guess with Scott Dixon, in his case, if he had no radio comms at all, I guess there's the aspect of, well, how do you know if you're a team member and you like, you're waiting to change a tire? How on earth, in theory, are you then like the only, I guess, true way you're going to know that a car's coming down without complete radio communication is, I mean, maybe they could do like some very
Pit boards
loose.
exist.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. Although the thing with pit boards is that at St. Petersburg, like the pit lane and like there's like a section of grass in between two barriers, so you've.
That's true.
So I guess like pit crew, like pit crew members would have to go over two walls. I'm not sure race control would be particularly thrilled.
I don't know. I don't know how they do pit boards there, or even if they can. I don't know.
I don't think they can. I'm pretty sure it's. I'm pretty
Well,
sure
anyway,
they can't.
it's Dixon. He doesn't need it.
Because Dixon might as well just be his own team. Like just give him a car and then make sure that there's enough crew members to operate a pit stop. Aside from that, we don't need a strategist. We don't need, we probably don't even realistically need an engineer to set up the car. Dixon can do literally everything, pretty much. It seems. I guess the only thing that he truly lost without a radio was, apparently, according to him, was a chance at the victory itself. So, yeah, it was. I
pretty much agree with the rest of your opinion on the race. It was pretty boring, and I think St. Pete is not a good place to start the season. It's usually not that exciting. It's really not that good of a track. It doesn't usually produce very interesting racing, and I don't know. To me, it's not the ideal opener to the IndyCar season.
I think St. Petersburg has to kind of rely on either good, I guess good tire setup I don't mean tire setup, but basically like the tires that are supplied by Firestone. They're like good compounds to produce good strategies and good racing. But
you use the black wall.
Yeah,
you use the black wall tires, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Because Scott McLaughlin was screwed immediately because he started on the blacks, and then he didn't pit. So it only would have been advantageous for him to pit if he had started on the option. I don't know. I guess it's the green wall tires now. It used to be the red, but the option tire. And if he had started the option tire, then he would have been able to pit and at least not use it for the rest of the race, and then he probably would have had a chance to win. But because he didn't start on it, he was screwed. Pretty much. Because it seems most of the time in IndyCar, the ideal strategy is being on the option tire as little as possible.
Yeah, effectively, just for me, the more memorable races that St. Peter's had have been the more chaotic ones, 2020 and 2023. So, I don't know. It's, it's a nice addition to the calendar, but for me, maybe a slightly different place for a season opener. But then I guess I don't necessarily know where else you could, I guess, start the season, or what other. Actually, I was gonna say Road America, but maybe it might be too cold for Road America. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, right. I don't know my North American geography well enough.
I don't know how warm it is there, but it is not warm.
We can put snow. We'll put snow tires. Actually, no, don't do that for. Out of all the tracks, don't do it for Road America. That's that track. That track, it would benefit. It's fine in either wet or the dry. Let's not have a snow race there. Well, unless if it's a snowmobile, then fair enough. But not a race car.
It's currently 3 degrees, so it might be a
3
little
degrees.
bit
cold. Wow. Oh, that's toast. That's toasty. Yeah. Okay. I think I guess the race we've kind of discussed enough. Guys, for me, I mainly want to talk about it. It's not necessarily about Fox itself, but it's more like I just have a few questions which probably will never get answered. But I might as well just sort of say them. I might as well just say them because I am entirely curious, and maybe there might be either someone in the comments who could answer or just whatever. But basically, for those that don't know, there is an international feed that is obviously, well, a lot is made of Fox's debut for IndyCar, but and whilst the international feed does get the Fox commentators and the Fox pit reporters and most of the Fox graphics package, note how I said most, not all, but basically you don't entirely get every single bit of the Fox coverage, and what I mean by that is over here, mostly I guess it's for sponsorship reasons. They don't have but basically they'll just have they'll have an IndyCar logo where there would ordinarily be a sponsor, for example. But the thing that I'm, I guess, mostly curious about is that one of Fox's new additions, compared to when NBC was what was part of what was the host broadcaster, is that they've got this new aero screen sort of graphic display which shows throttle and actually I think quite a neat feature in which like when you go through every turn it comes up with how many feet you are away from a turn, which for a new person watching IndyCar, I think that's quite neat. But at least internationally, or I might even be kind and say at least in the UK, we didn't get that.
Oh.
So
I was going to say that it was actually pretty good.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic, but for some reason we don't get that. Now I have to imagine it's because there's I guess when they cut to an onboard or an onboard graphic or like the onboards themselves, and then they have the sort of aero screen graphic. Whenever they go onto an onboard, they'll probably have in the bottom corner they'll have like the car they're on board with like the name of the driver and something or other, and then they'll have like a sponsor of this onboard is sponsored by so and so. And that I guess can't be done for an international audience, which I can understand. What I'm just curious to know is what because people actually said, or I think people were because over in the UK when the US people go for an ad break, we still keep the live coverage, but there's like a UK commentator who will just sort of run over the general gist of the race, which is helpful enough. But they ask questions for people to send in via whichever some sort of social media platform, and one of them
You wouldn't
was
know anything about that.
no, exactly. One of the questions that I guess people were sending in was, it's been referenced on the broadcast that there's some kind of sort of error screen graphic, which but we didn't get that. And then the guy the UK broadcast or the UK commentator said, oh well, yeah, but we're using an international feed, so we don't get that at the moment. And so the question that I kind of pose is, and maybe this is impossible, but just curious, how possible is it that we can't just literally copy and paste every single element of the Fox broadcast and just and every single graphic and all that sort of thing, and instead of just where there's like a kind of some kind of, I guess, where there's like a sponsor name, just have either the driver's face or just like color highlights, like green, white, and for example, like basically just something to cover up where there is a sponsor, and but we can still are able to still see things like the aero screen, which from what I can tell, I don't think ever included a sponsor that is above the aero screen. I don't think there was, from what I could tell from when I saw sort of like a US feed highlights package of it. So the thing is, like the actual like the Fox graphics template, like the new graphics that you get, it is exactly. I think it like the basic template is exactly the same. Like like the timing stand, which has, but I mean I think that actually just had general issues period during qualifying with lap times coming in. So, but but I can understand that. They'll iron them out as time goes on, I'm sure. But it's like like the basic template of the graphics we like the international viewers will still get. But it's what I'm more just saying is like how possible is it to just like literally copy and paste every single like basically put the Fox US feed and then just replace the sections where there were meant to be sponsors with either an IndyCar logo or just something relevant to a race which can fill out that space. Because I don't know, it's just a bit, it just feels like you're kind of missing, especially with something like the Aero Screen Halo thing. I think that just is missing something that certainly could, polish up something, for at least international viewers. Again, I'm sure there are many reasons for this, but there's always something that has, I guess, kind of sort of thing, something that I've always been intrigued by, and that's when you again an international perspective, you have obviously on pit road, and the commentators they'll have, they'll do like pieces to camera and all that sort of thing. That's all good, but you don't get that from the international audience, or you get something which I think is a fair bit more awkward, and that they'll briefly cut to let's say Jack Harvey is about to do a piece to camera, like but the previous shot was of cars on the racetrack, and this is generally something you'd see on like the warm-up lap, but they're showing a car and then they're about to, for the US feed, they'll then cut to Jack Harvey, and then this is just an example, by the way. They'll cut to Jack Harvey, but then for the international viewers, you see like about a second, if that, of Jack Harvey, and then they'll immediately cut to some like a random onboard or just a random like helicopter shot or just somewhere around the track. It's just like this really strange cut to something different. Now, I think I know. Again, I think I know why, because it's like some kind of trying to. Basically, it's like if you've got international broadcasters, you don't necessarily want to see like, for example, microphones with Fox Sports on them being sort of put in front of like cameras. I can sort of understand that, but then, okay, I say understand. I understand the intention with why it's done, but the thing that confuses me is that when drivers are interviewed, so like let's say Louis Foster was taken out of the medical center after his lap 1 accident with Will Power and Nolan Siegel. When he was interviewed, that that he was getting in, you could actually see the interview. The Fox Sports logoed microphones were still there, and you could see that. But we can't see like when they're on pit, like doing piece to camera on pit road or like pre-race when the commentators. But you can't see that. So I'm thinking, so why can we?
Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe they meant to cut away and then they didn't.
But the thing was, it's like I think it was done with Louis Foster. I think when Siegel was interviewed and when Alex Palau was interviewed when he won, like. I mean, admittedly, it would be very weird that when they're just about to interview someone and then they cut to a random helicopter shot when the winner is being interviewed. I can understand that would be really awkward.
Mostly my opinion is it has to do with the rights and whatever agreements the networks have come to in terms of and what is shown and what isn't. I know as viewers that we don't care necessarily where the organizations are getting the broadcasts, but ultimately whatever agreement they came to in terms of the rebroadcast rights, obviously they don't want to show the logos or can't show the logos.
Right. Okay. I think we've basically gone over that, and yeah, I mean, I don't know the TV landscape well enough, so to speak, on that front. But no, I'm just curious. I just want the coverage to be as good as possible for everybody, include whether that be the US,
Don't we all? Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Exactly. I
mean,
did.
my impressions of the Fox thing was pretty good. I mean, I'm not exactly a Will Buxton enjoyer, but he's way better as a commentator than he is at analysis. As a commentator, I could stand him.
I will.
So I
I
guess
will.
that's something.
Yeah. I will say. You know. I've never really minded. I wouldn't say he's the best pit reporter or like or an or analyst and so on. But I'm not gonna say I heavily dislike or anything. But I will say that when because he has commentated before. He commentated for GP2 back from like 2012 to 2014 until we had the amazing Alex Jakes come in and do his amazing commentary work. But when he was commentating or the lead commentator for GP2, he was really good. But I must admit, when I initially heard that he was going to do the IndyCar stuff, I was thinking, oh well, I mean, when he was commentating, and this was like 10 years ago, he was really good, but that was 10 years ago, and he's been mostly doing sort of like pit lane kind of stuff. So is this really, is it going to work? But I'll be honest, I think he did a really good job. And I mean, like I say, if him and the rest of the commentary and pit road team do or did the job that they did by making a race which was or felt fairly mediocre seem engaging enough to keep on watching, then yeah, I think that's a good thing, and I can't imagine how good they'll be when there's actually a really good race on. So I'm optimistic. I mean, yeah, there's a few small teething things, but honestly, like that's just to be expected. And I think they'll iron them out as time goes on. So yeah, as new TV eras go, I think there's a very solid start, and I think there's good signs for progress. But I guess this is unintentional, but sort of kind of a link from Will Buxton's GP2 commentary antics. I was going to bring up something about another F1 feeder series thing from Formula 3. Now initially when I guess we planned to do the podcast today, I was going to bring up that there was, despite the season or the F3 season being a week away, well, a week away as we're recording this, which is on Friday. On the Friday prior to the F3 season beginning in Australia, there was one seat which was open. However, that has been taken up by Nikita Bedrin for AIX Racing, the number 28 car. However, it's only for round one, which now that sort of concerns me. So Bedrin has raced. So Bedrin raced last year for AIX in last year's F3 campaign, and that was his second season. But he was his main campaign. I think he'd signed a deal for Formula Regional, I think with Santalok Racing. And so therefore that kind of indicates that probably he wasn't going to do this. And especially as I think AIX Racing for a pre-season test at Barcelona, they had someone else in the car. I think it was Jonas Reed, who's the son of Christian Reed, the Proton competition guy. I don't know if he's team principal or team owner or something like that, but yeah, they had Jonas Reed in the F3 car at the test, but for whatever reason, he's not racing. Or at least he's not racing in round one. And I'm pretty sure during post-season testing last year, AIX Racing had other people who weren't Jonas Reed testing for them as well. But obviously, I don't think they have got any of the seats at AIX Racing. Or I think there was like two Mexican drivers, but neither of them, I think, actually, well, I don't think any of them have got any of the AIX seats. But the indication that, given that this was, I mean, generally F1 feeder series stuff, the seats kind of get filled sort of in and around like the winter period, sort of either sort of December, January kind of time, once postseason testing of last year has concluded. And then they can I guess get prepared for pre-season and so on. But yeah, I think the fact that there hadn't been an announcement up until today, and given that this is only for the first round, I don't know. That kind of, I'm hoping this is not like some kind of like what happened with the Dale Coyne team in IndyCar last year, where there was a mostly constant rotation of drivers for this particular entry. So yeah, it'll be it might be interesting to see how this goes. I mean, maybe we'll see Benjamin in the car for more rounds, but I mean, he's already signed a commitment to Formula Regionals, so maybe something to keep an eye on this season. I mean, Benjamin isn't bad, but I guess maybe as he wasn't intending to be there, and it's seeing as it's the first round, I guess we'll have to see. We'll have to see on that one. As things go. I mean, I would say, do you have any thoughts? But I do know that you don't really follow the F1 feeder series all that much, which I can understand. But
it's an 8-mile M&M situation. You know, you have one shot.
Yeah, I think it's basically kind of got to make the most of it. I mean, if you're Nikita Bedrin, make the most of it. I mean, he actually won a race for them last year, which was, I mean, generally, for those who don't know, AIX Racing is not one of the sort of the better performing teams usually, but and that they can spring a surprise every now and then. But yeah, Bedrin for them last year did win a race. I don't know whether this has an impact, but there is a brand new F3 car that's being introduced for this year. It kind of reminds me of like the GP3 car that I guess the most recent F3 car, which people have said is quite a bulky thing compared to what the older F3 cars were like, which were like these pretty fast go-karts with lightning quick handling. But whereas like this new the 25 car is kind of like the previous F3 car and the original, like one of the earlier, lighter, sort of mid 2000s F3 cars. It's kind of like they're merged together, so to speak. I mean, I have absolutely no idea what that means in terms of whether it will create a different racing spectacle. Who knows? But I guess either way, just thought that was an interesting development and maybe something to keep note of as the F3 season progresses. And that leaves us with the final thing, which I guess reluctantly we're still calling the Van Gisberger, even though I kind of regret that I
You regret ever mentioning it.
I do regret that now. But we have got the Van Gisberger, which for those who are unfamiliar is reserved for a funny moment that has happened in the world of racing, which we feel has been kind of sort of ignored. Right, so today's Van Gisberger is for the Formula Winter Series. A very okay. There's no sugarcoating it. Like it generally, it's not a series which gains a whole lot of attention. I mean, it's like the Toyota Racing Series where you get young racing drivers or young single-seater hopefuls, and it keeps them active when most of the places in the world where they could go racing are either full of snow or whatever. It's like the Formula Winter Series is mostly based in Europe, and I think just started a couple of years ago. But anyway, despite the fact that it is a winter series, and maybe there's less pressure than a sort of a normal main season, there's still expectations, and so to speak, young drivers trying to prove themselves, and it's important that especially at the start of a race, you have you get the perfect launch off the line. You make sure that your competitors are there's no chance a competitor of yours can have any chance of getting up the inside. You want the optimum start, and you want the optimum starting conditions. So, with that, the marshal is waving the green flag. The 5 lights will come up on the board, and it's 1, 2, 3, go! And half the field, I've kind of got the gist of what is going on. Half the field are like, what's going on?
We only get 3, yeah.
It's just, I just love how immediate, like, it's not even
Honestly,
like...
they should do that in F1. Forget about
exactly.
the 5 lights. It can just go out at any time.
Literally any time.
As long as it started, it can go out at any time.
Yeah, exactly. just immediately, it's
I mean, it would certainly keep you on your toes for sure.
exactly. So it was. I tell you what, that is like, there was like something made of Valtteri Bottas's start in Austria, I think like 2019, because it was like, it was along the lines of sort of very. Basically, his reaction time was sort of just about within the capacity of maybe a human could react in that time, but in some ways you're kind of anticipating the start. In this case, there is no chance anybody has any way of anticipating what's going to happen.
That's true.
So, but in the end, what ended up happening is, I think midway through the lap, they actually red flagged the race, because I guess they decided, well, it's not the fairest. I mean, how hard did it come to the conclusion of it maybe wasn't the most balanced way of making sure? Like, I mean, there's a little bit of luck involved in that to a degree. I mean, technically, it's the same conditions for everybody, but it's, I don't know.
True.
I like how it's just the case. It's not even like sort of 1, 2, and then there's like a pause, and then the lights go off. No, it was just 1, 2, 3, and then like it was almost immediately after the third light went out. It just went like, nope,
Yeah.
we're going off. It's that it always creases me up, this clip. I mean, it's about a month old and so on. I think that the Winter Series season is nearly over, but yeah, maybe it's something that all racing categories around the world should take note of. So, yeah, that was our Van Gisbergen, and actually probably one of my favorite Van Gisbergers that we've actually done so far. But anyway, I mean, I think with that we'll probably end. I mean, to be fair, I don't actually know if this will get to an hour because of my internet problems. But I mean, to be fair, maybe like I might just put in like sort of 20 minutes of like just a screen, like for the YouTube video, just a screen of, or just the screen of the Code 60 podcast logo, and then there'd just be no sound. This illusion that Steph thinks that we've gone over this thing again, but actually we haven't. So, because trust me, we're not doing 56 minutes again. So
You never know.
oh,
It could happen.
maybe like if there's like a very slow news day, or because we're now getting into the part of the season where motorsport is getting out of its hibernation, and so therefore everyone is active once again. But I mean, who knows? But yeah, I mean, anything you have, any final thoughts that you have or wish to say to the audience? No?
Think we're good.
Okay. Yeah, I think with that we will end. Thank you very much for listening or watching, or whatever way you digest this podcast. I've actually said the same thing I did in a previous podcast towards the end, and that didn't make sense either. But never mind. With that, thank you very much for listening, etc. And until the next podcast, enjoy the rest of your day, and be kind to each other and enjoy the rest of your day. Oh dear, I messed that up. Anyway, goodbye.